Right, I'm going to have a go at fixing the Boxford. I've got my phosphor bronze sheet, which has come this morning. So I've cut a couple of strips off, and I'll show you what I am going to do, or I'm going to try. So I've given it all a really good clean in acetone this. And I've wrapped my phosphor bronze tightly around the shaft there and clean that in acetone. What I'm going to do is slather it in epoxy and slip the shaft in with the epoxy on. Locate the chuck onto that shaft, like so. Get it in place, lock the tailstock down so everything now is lined up. Then I'm going to make some kind of little well around here, probably with hot melt glue, and leave it proud, pour some epoxy in so it kind of just runs down and tightens up. And then in an hour or two, as the epoxy starts to set up, I'll come back and I will strip off the hot melt glue, etc. And just have a bit of a clean up. I'm going to have to cut this phosphor bronze flush with the top of this sort of tailstock here once the epoxy's set. So I'll cut that off, and then I'll kind of do the same with the cap, same kind of thing. Cast the but what I'm going to do is, well, I'll show you that when I come to it anyway. So let's get some epoxy in there. Right, I've heated up my epoxy. I just had to change this. I've actually fixed it on tight with hot melt glue because the tape kept popping off just because of the tension. It's wound so tight around that. So I've fixed that on with hot melt glue. I've mixed my epoxy and I've heated my epoxy up slightly just so that the initial setup's a little bit quicker on it. So I'll get some epoxy in there. This really is just to bed the phosphor bronze strip on, just to hold it in, hold it tight, snugly in place. And I'll put some on the phosphor bronze as well. Probably going to end up with a right slathering mess here in a minute. And I'll put some on the shaft as well. I'm going to come out and back out in a couple of hours as this starts to cure, and just have a bit of a clean up, because I don't want this thing completely locked up with epoxy tomorrow. This is a temporary / permanent fix until I can find something possibly better to do, as in some proper shells or bearings. But let's give this a go and see what happens. We'll tighten that in. Lock that down. Maybe get a bit more epoxy in there, So we're going again with it. We're going to try it again. Let's just hold it up while I get the tailstock in place. And it's not squashing all the epoxy out. Lock that down. That's it. How's it looking at the back? Ow. And your head on that shelf. That looks alright. It's drooling out the bottom now. So I'm going to have to put some hot melt glue under there to stop all that running out. What a mess. What a mess. But I think it's going to work. Just what I did last time. There's hot melt glue and epoxy all over the place, but when I'd finished it was where it mattered. We'll let that go off a little bit and I'll bring it back. So it's been 24 hours since I laid this up, so I'm going to take it off. So far so good. I'm going to get all that hot melt glue off there that's locking the spindle down, probably. She turns. The tailstock back. More glue. There we go. That just leaves the hot melt glue on the spindle. A bit of epoxy there to clean off. But essentially, that's the that's for phosphor bronze in place. I'm going to have to kind of cut a couple of grooves in this so some oil can get round, I think, from what I have seen of other phosphor bronze bearings. I can file that down now, that edge. That seems pretty good, that. I'll try the spindle in it. That seems really nice, that. And it's picked that up without any movement whatsoever. So that seems really nice, that. So I'm going to cast the bearing around the top now, or the shim around the top, and that'll take all this horrible wiggle inside movement out of that. Got a little plan for that now. Right, so obviously I can't cast this epoxy and phosphor bronze sheet in place because I can't. There's no way of really of me wrapping it and holding it around that whilst it's still under that one. So what my plan is, I've cut a couple of pieces of steel here. I think that one's for the back, or one of them's for somewhere, yeah, there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bolt them in place, there, and then I'm going to cast that block there over it. So I'm going to bolt them down. First of all, I've just got to wrap the phosphor bronze around that, and then I'm going to do the exact reverse of what I did underneath by bedding that with epoxy and just dropping it back down on top, and I'll seal everything with hot melt glue before I do it. So I'm going to have a go at this now. I've bolted my 2 plates down, and when I've finished casting this top, then plates will act as shims underneath this, so they'll be cut to size and put in place. Now I've roughed up the phosphor bronze on the back, cleaned it loads of times with acetone and cleaned up inside here. You can see the state of that shell there, and all the grooves and the wear in it. So let's get the epoxy on. Should have really put some oil on there. I'm going to do that. I'm going to put some oil on that plate, and this epoxy doesn't stick to it. Really want epoxy in there because that's threaded, but I didn't clean the oil out of there, so I don't think the epoxy will stick too well inside that. Right, let's wipe that off there. Now let that set up. I'll come back and check it in a couple of hours, but I'm not going to release it. I'm just going to completely leave it and just let that set, and then this time tomorrow I will come and take it off. So last night, about 3 hours in, I came out and I took everything to bits because the epoxy had actually bonded. It had tacked up enough that it was holding the phosphor bronze sheet in. So I snipped it off with the scissors and I pushed the spindle back and I locked it in place with these bolts, and I tightened it down just so the epoxy was perfectly to the shape of the actual spindle. And I've drilled the hole in today, and I'm going to cut these grooves in here so that the oil can get around the bearing or around the sleeve. I'm going to cut 2 in there as well. I'm going to use my little Dremel for that, with a little carbide burr on, so I'm just going to gently, about half the thickness of the material, just run them in. So I've put the 2 slots in there, the 2 oil ways. We're going to see how it spins. Try a drop of oil in there. The oil's certainly getting around her alright. It's turning really nice, that. Much nicer than it did on the brass. And I think this probably needs connecting to the motor now. And just let it have a really slow spin. Yeah, there's oil. There's oil all the way through there, which is great. Do you know what, before I go any further, I'm just going to run it, I think. I am just going to run it and see what happens. To be running very freely. Well, she runs alright with the chuck on. I've got a rattle on this, and the rattle is this phosphor bronze bush here, which spins against the headstock, and it tightens up against them two. And it's so worn, that thing, because obviously the spindle was tilted, so it's kind of worn that through the centre, and it rattles around on there, which isn't good. So I need to, when I get it fixed, this I'm going to turn myself another bearing to fit on the back one that's a nice tight snug fit. I'm going to run this for a little while. It's not heating up at all, this, it's just staying nice and cool. I'm really pleased about that. Before, with the brass in there, it was getting really hot, so I could only use it for, you know, 3, 4, 5 minutes before it got so hot that the whole thing kind of locked up as it expanded. But no, so far that is fantastic. Very pleased with that. So I'm going to run it and just let that bed in. Maybe I should really, I don't know, put some grinding paste in there and just kind of lap it, but I'm not going to do. I'm going to try and turn something on it, and we'll see if I know if there'll be any improvement. Right, so I've got it put back together, and I'm just going to show you a little bit of facing off work now. All I've got to do really is sort out this sideways travel on these shims on the back, because they're worn unevenly. So that one's rattling a little slight bit, so I need to take that sideways play out, and I think I'll be good. Let's do a bit of turning. Problem is here, the camera is where I want to be, in my way. The outside of these bolts are hardened or case hardened, definitely. But because they're so hard there, they set up a little bit of vibration as the cutter goes past them. Take a smaller pass. There we go. All I need to do now is sort out a bit of research on cutters, cutter angles, machine speeds, etc, etc. And then see what I can do on it. So there we go, guys, there is the bolt head I've just faced off. And as I said, there is still a little bit of sideways movement on the spindle. So I think once I get that sorted, I think it'll take out a lot of this chattering this sideways chattering that's probably causing them little uneven cuts, and probably my technique as well. Here is something I made last night. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure if you needed one of them, then that would do a great job. But anyway, that's it for me lathe for now, chappies. I will update you probably on it when I've done the sideways travel thing. Make some little phosphor bronze washers for that. I also need to take the play out of the cross slide, or one of the cross slides, the going towards the work one, and probably make an oil tray, because there's copious amounts of oil dripping from these oil drippers all down onto the bench, so I'm going to have to make a little tray. I'll probably make one out of fiberglass and make a tray and bolt it down onto that. Otherwise I'm just going to have a big oily bench. Right chaps, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you quite soon.